ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
With less than 2 weeks until Americans vote, Donald Trump's campaign keeps getting stranger. From abandoning a town hall meeting to play music, to commenting on the genitalia of a dead golfer, and suggesting he'd deploy the military against his enemy within the United States. But still, the polls are neck and neck. Today, we talk to Rina Shah, a former Republican strategist, about the race to the finish line. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Rina, less than 2 weeks before the US election, we're going to discuss with you the strategies of both sides as they try and win over voters and which voters they're actually targeting. So we better start at McDonald's in Pennsylvania.
Well, I'm looking for a job, and I've always wanted to work at McDonald's, but I never did. If you don't mind, I want to work the French fry counter.
Absolutely.
So just tell me about Trump's trip there. And by the way, the McDonald's was actually closed. It was just full of Trump supporters.
So I'll say this. Trump recognizes how important it is to campaign with the ferocity at this point in the race. People are saying that was a sign of him being real, authentic, and really connecting there in person.
How are you? Nice to see you. That's great. Thank you, man. It's going to be the best you ever. I made it myself.
You're the best. Make America
That's
great.
it. Thank you, man. Thank you.
And frankly, both campaigns right now have sights set on Pennsylvania firmly. Out of all of the 6 to 7 swing states we know will determine the outcome of election 2024, we've seen Pennsylvania to be paramount, and in particular, just a few counties there.
Well, I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again.
And then, of course, Rina, Donald Trump went from serving fries to talking about the genitalia of a former and now deceased golfer, Arnold Palmer.
He's been making remarks that have been dubbed as locker room talk for well over a decade. Not only did he do it in his private life, he did it in the first campaign for the White House, and people took to defending that.
This is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough. And I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, "Oh my God, that's unbelievable." I had to
We are
say it.
seeing Trump be exactly who he is, unchanged, never looking like anything has happened in his life to make him change his mind about who he ought to present himself as.
It was, of course, in Pennsylvania too, in the state's largest city, Philadelphia, where Donald Trump held this, Rina, rather strange town hall meeting that descended into a music fest.
Let's not do any more questions. Let's just listen to music. Let's make it into a music. Who the hell wants to hear questions, right? So put on Pavarotti singing Ave Maria. Nice and loud. Turn it up louder. We want a little action here. Turn it up louder.
Well, that was very bizarre. Him swaying on stage to songs. There are varying accounts. People in the audience say that he was waiting for medical attention to be rendered to a couple folks in the crowd who had had events of fainting, it seemed.
And those two people that went down are patriots, and we love them.
Yes.
And because of them, we ended up with some good music, right? Right?
And then there are folks who say, hey, it really was that bizarre. Why would he kill time like that? Especially at a very, very important place. Again, Pennsylvania is almost ground zero for courting the vote.
Yeah, all right. Well, Kamala Harris, of course, she is also campaigning at great pace, and she started really using Trump's behaviour more and more in her campaigning. She's even using clips of him at her rallies, pointing out that his behaviour is somewhat odd.
He tells us who he is, and he tells us what he would do if he is elected president. Please roll the clip.
The worst people are the enemies from within. The enemy from within. Those people are more dangerous, the enemy from within, than Russia and China. These people should be put in jail.
And I think it's also quite unconventional to see a candidate bring clips of their opponent to the stage, but it seems to be landing well, because when you're able to show the opponent in their own words, and when you're able to not have to explain anything and frankly point to a visual, then you're kind of winning.
Yeah, so that's one of her tactics, I suppose, is to point out Donald Trump's strange behaviour. No McDonald's outings for her, but she has been doing a lot of media interviews, hasn't she?
Harris has even gone to what would be considered non-friendly media outlets. Yes. Of course, I'm talking about Fox News being probably the most prominent of all the right-leaning outlets that are out there.
What he has been saying about the enemy within, that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people, that's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line.
You know, it was seen to be something that people thought she may not do. And the very fact that she did it left a lot of folks feeling that she was willing and not only able to do this tough task, but that she even succeeded in it by looking like she was willing to go into the lion's den and fight, even though maybe this was a fight that could not be won on any front.
But Rina, is she really going to win over a Fox network viewer by appearing in an interview on Fox? I mean, why did she do it?
Perhaps the goal was never to win over the actual stalwart viewer of Fox News programming, but it was more to send a message that she's not scared of any challenge, of any scenario in which there may be unfriendly actors.
All right, so Rina, let's have a look now more deeply at what both sides really need to do to swing voters their way. And just before we do that, a reminder, of course, people will know this, that the polling is so tight that there really is almost nobody that's willing to call this election.
There's no doubt that this election presents a different challenge to the political class, to the political industry, especially to the polling industry. Early voting right now we're seeing is in the millions. And I think at this time, we're near the 20 million mark. That is really, really quite something when you're looking at the places that matter. Places like Georgia, where early voting in these numbers has never been seen before. At the end of the day, everything's looking a little too close to call. What we have to remember here, though, is that this winner might not be known on the night of Election Day. We may not even know a week out. And if we're really in our most unlucky state, we may not know for a month out.
Oh my gosh. It'll be a long wait. Okay, just tell me, explain a bit further though, because that early voting, what's that a signal of? Does the Trump campaign see that as a positive for them, or does the Harris campaign think it's good for them? Does it mean anything at this point? At
this point, early voting numbers, frankly, just kind of energized both bases, but more so the Democrats right now, because early voting does tend to favor Democrats. Same-day voting is largely done by Republicans. So we don't really have a good takeaway from these numbers right now. All we can say is that's good enthusiasm. What we're looking for beyond the numbers is who is showing up to vote, because that is going to be where we need to split hairs in the aftermath and drill down to find out why. This is every 4 years, a tough game that's hard fought, but has been for the past decade one that we could not have expected to be dominated by the force that is the former President Donald J. Trump. The very fact that he lost the White House the last time and stands to potentially win it really challenges the consciousness.
Just explain who they are actually targeting at this point, which voters they are after. In places like, of course, Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, which is absolutely crucial, and there's a lot of effort being put into that area.
In particular, Harris and Walz are courting what would be considered the reproductive vote. And so that's women of childbearing age, particularly in the suburbs. These are women that are typically college educated and are not happy with the overturn of Roe versus Wade, which enshrined the right to abortion. And so in going to these communities outside of major cities like Philadelphia, what the Harris-Walz campaign is trying to do is bring up that betrayal that these women do feel to a large extent by Trump, whose Supreme Court justice picks were essentially responsible in every way for why abortion is what it is state by state. Now, for Trump fans, it's a different story. They are targeting those folks who are fearful about immigrants pouring in across the southern border of the United States. We heard this summer Trump and Vance call for mass deportations. Who they are targeting right now is those folks who are worried about crime, public safety, and immigration being tied to that, but more so about their life not being any better now than it was 4 years ago. So the economic message as well. That is what the Trump-Vance campaign wants to bring out their voters with.
So, Rina, this really is now the race to the finish line. Harris and Trump, as we said, are neck and neck. Do you think the polls might sway one way or the other in the days ahead, or is it really going to be this tight come election day?
We see a little bit of swinging here and there, which we are used to. I don't expect we'll see anything more than this unless there is an October surprise. Maybe there's something that's foreign in nature, an adversary that has, God forbid, some kind of plan. People are, of course, concerned about Russia's involvement in our elections. In the event that we lack an October surprise that's so bombastic that it really helps one side more than the other, we could be in a place where this thing is in a dead heat all the way up to November 5th.
Well, as someone who used to work, of course, for the Republican Party, but who doesn't support Donald Trump, how do you feel about the fact that Americans could very well return him to the White House in a few weeks' time?
I don't feel as much disappointment as I feel real anger about it, because what it highlights to me is that we have too much of a short-term memory as an electorate, that we aren't willing to prioritize what I believe are our first principles. You know, essentially what our founders wanted was to keep a king away from the White House, to keep an authoritarian out of the Oval Office, to have a check on the executive branch by both the judicial and legislative branches. What I worry about greatly in the event of a Trump win is not just the chaos that could be promulgated from that one branch, but really the lack of trust that will continue to essentially find its place in American political life. What we know now is that anything is possible. So political violence, unfortunately, has a place in American life. And we can draw a direct line to Trump's time in office. Was he the creator of all that? Was he the first one to be at the forefront of calling for violence? In many ways in the modern era, yes. We never saw an American president like him. What would he be like the second time around? I shudder to think about it.
Rina Shah is a political strategist and former senior Republican congressional aide and a former presidential campaign advisor. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. ABC News Daily will be back again on Monday. Thanks for listening.